Welcome everyone to the year-long journey. And today we're going to be talking about response to intervention in our session. Oh, you want me to tilt the camera? Can you guys see me? Let me see.
That's a little better, McKinney. Go just a tad bit lower for us.
Here?
Perfect.
Okay, because I can't see myself. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. And in today's session, this is a session that's coming from Cox Campus. And you can find our online courses and resources here. And we have a great community on Cox Campus. And this website is free due to the support of some generous donors. Our courses qualify for professional development credit through Bright from the Start and IASET. And we're going to go ahead and post the link. I think Alex just posted that link in the chat. Thank you, Alex. And some of you already started doing this just to introduce yourselves and where you live. And I saw a couple of people, somebody said they were from South Georgia, Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, welcome. Colorado. So glad to see you here, Alicia. And I would also like to ask you right now in the chat, if you can tell me how confident you feel with your current knowledge about response from intervention on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being, I've never heard of that before, 10 being, I think I'm an expert at RTI, 5, I'm in the middle, I know some things I don't know, I want to learn. So if you can drop in the chat for me on a scale from 0 to 10, how do you feel about what your knowledge around response to intervention? Oh, wow, I see a range. I see some 5s, 3s, 8, 7. So welcome to everyone here, okay? So let's move to the next slide, and I hope that you learned some things from this training. So if you haven't done so already, just be sure later on to create a membership to Cox Campus in the chat, and we're going to talk about response to intervention. I have one more question for you. If you've taken this course already, I would like you to say yes in the chat. And if you haven't taken our online course, just say no. So yes, if you've taken it, no, if you haven't. So I just kind of give me a little bit. Okay, good. All right. It's okay if you have or haven't. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on, and I'm going to introduce myself. And there I am. And my name is McKinney Coleman. I've been in education for about 19 years. And it's probably going on my 20th now, but I just enjoy being able to help and support teachers around language and literacy. I used to be a kindergarten and first grade teacher for about 7 years. And then I was an instructional coach, reading coach for about 7 years. And right now I work for the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. And what I do now is I'm a content developer, instructional designer. So I help to create online courses for Cox Campus. So let's talk about the goals for this course. So what we're going to learn here is we're going to learn the 5 core tenets of RTI. Then we're going to take some time to reflect on your own personal teaching practices. And then you're going to also learn a way to help problem solve. And then just discover how you can find more useful content on Cox Campus. So I'm just going to give you a true or false. You don't have to put this in the chat. I just want you to think about this, okay? So I want you to think true or false. Response to intervention is the sole responsibility of the teacher. So if you think it's true or false, you don't have to put it in the chat, just thinking, okay? The next statement is the main purpose of response to intervention is prevention. Okay, so just think about that. Okay, do you think that's true or false? And then the third statement, students have to stay in their same tier during the entire school year. So just think about that. Do you think that's true or false? And we're going to revisit these things at the end of this training, okay? All right. So let's start off by just watching part of the course, which is an introduction to response to intervention.
What if we knew how to prevent reading difficulties? What if you could ensure the students in your school become successful readers? Hi, I'm Peyton, a teacher at the Atlanta Speech School. In this course, we're going to explore response to intervention, or more commonly called RTI for short. But before we talk about RTI, it's important that we discuss MTSS. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Support, a data-driven prevention framework. MTSS centers assessment to predict and identify students who may benefit from additional supports in any academic area, and students whose learning may be impacted due to behavior, social, and emotional needs. In other words, think of the MTSS prevention framework addressing the whole child, including their social emotional needs, behavioral concerns, and all their academic learning outcomes. You may be asking yourself, if MTSS is a prevention framework, then what is RTI? Response to intervention, or RTI, is the part of the prevention framework focused on the academic domain of MTSS. This approach is used to identify children requiring additional tiers of support in areas like reading and carefully monitoring their response to those tiers. To quickly recap, MTSS is a comprehensive prevention framework, and RTI is a process within this multi-tiered system of support that is focused on academics. So, what do we mean when we say prevention? The word prevention is a powerful word when used in the context of changing a child's life forever. Let's go back to the question I asked at the beginning. What if we could prevent children from becoming struggling readers? Here at Cox Campus, we are all about cultivating successful readers. In fact, we know that 95% of all children can learn to read at a basic skill level by the end of first grade. 95%. That's a big deal. Having an effective RTI system in place is a large piece of the puzzle for preventing reading difficulties. This is why it's extremely important to understand that you are a valuable part of the process and to discuss where you fit in. The ultimate goal of RTI is the creation of an instructional system focused on how students respond to evidence-based practices and interventions that are delivered with integrity and fidelity, instead of waiting for a special education referral, or worse, waiting for children to fail. The RTI process is made up of 5 core tenets that you will learn about in later steps. But first, let's dispel some common myths about RTI.
All right, so just like was stated in video, there are 5 core tenets of RTI: universal screening, multi-prevention system, progress monitoring, database decision-making, and infrastructures and systems. And during this training, we're going to look at each one, just a little small snippet of each one, and then we're going to just take a little time after each one to just reflect on what's happening in your classroom or at your school. So we're going to start off by talking about universal screening. And universal screening is a system for identifying students who would benefit from enhanced instructional practices. So basically what that means is it's an overall system that just to see what students that we may have that may be at risk or not at risk. And we're just going to watch a very quick video to see what that means.
Think of screening like going to your doctor's office and getting your temperature checked. Universal screening allows us to check if our students' temperatures are at 98.6 degrees. And just like a temperature of 105 alerts us that something is wrong, so do universal screening indicators.
Okay, and so one thing that is very important to know is the difference between when you're using like a assessment as a universal screener, or if you are using an assessment for diagnostic assessment. So if we go to the next slide, the purpose, and kind of like thinking of it, it helps to kind of think of like a kind of a metaphor for like each one. So for universal screening, the purpose is to administer or provide a snapshot, just a general snapshot of what students know, so that we can more easily identify who has met grade level benchmark and who needs more secondary and tertiary intervention, which we'll talk about a little later. So it's like, think about it as, if you see the picture right there, like as a drone, like, you know how a drone kind of goes above the earth and like sees like a general like view of the earth and may see like little trouble spots, right, that you see. So diagnostic assessment. So then if a universal screener is going to inform classroom instruction, but it's only a few skills that are assessed, then you may be saying, okay, well, how do I know like what specific skills I need to really use to inform instruction? And that's where you use a diagnostic assessment. So these are assessments that are designed to dive deeply into one component of reading, for example, like phonemic awareness or phonics, and then provide what specific skills within those areas students may need. And so without these kind of assessments, it's going to probably be a little hard to see what the gaps we need to fill for students. So a good way to look at that is like you're using a microscope, kind of looking at specific skill areas very deeply and seeing what you see. So let me give you a specific example for like in reading. For example, you may have a universal screener that is assessing phonemic awareness, and it just may tell you that, okay, this child is needs more support in the area of like segmenting, but you may not know, are they having problems segmenting blends? Are they having problems segmenting words that have more than 3 sounds, 6 sounds? Like you may want to know like specifics like that. And a diagnostic assessment is what to tell you. Thanks, Alex, for giving the drone analogy. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to reflect now. Okay, so let me tell you, the way we're going to do this, you're going to see like this kind of slide after each one of the core tenets of RTI. And when we get to this section, we're going to have like a little discussion. And if you want to come off of mute and press the raise hand, so at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, you'll see like a little hand and it says raise hand. Just raise your hand. And then one of my wonderful assistants today, Sam, will take you off mute so that you can talk. And also you have the option to even add your comment in the comments if you don't want to come off of mute and talk, but we love a good discussion. So the first question is, what screening process do you have at your school now to identify students who need extra support? So again, you can come off mute by raising your hand and Sam will bring you off of mute. Or if you want to type in the chat and tell us what process you're using at your school or in your classroom right now to identify students that have extra support. I see Dibbles. We used to use Dibbles when I was a teacher. I used to use Dibbles. Child Find. I've never heard of Child Find. Okay, any other comments about what you use already at your school? MAP and Mind Play, okay. Developmental Pathways, okay. MAP, Dibbles, and Core Phonics Survey. I used to use the Core Phonics Survey. All right, so great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next core tenet. Okay, our next core tenet is multi-prevention systems. And so this is a way that provides access to increasingly intense levels of instruction and interventions. And so we're going to go ahead and watch a quick video about multi-prevention systems.
The next core tenet of RTI is a multi-prevention system. It provides access to increasingly intense levels of instruction and interventions. You've probably seen a framework depicting the 3 tiers of instruction, like this one. Looking at this framework, we can see how prevention is provided at multiple levels. Let's take a closer look at each one. The foundation of RTI.
All right, so I'm sure some of you or most of you have seen this kind of image before with the tiers of instruction, okay? And basically, I'm just going to go and talk about each tier. So if you're starting at tier 1 is for all students, and you're going to see this in general education classrooms. And this is where we use research-based reading curriculum and evidence-based practices. And this includes school and classroom culture, schedules, behavioral supports, and differentiated instruction, okay? So then that's where the majority of students are going to be. Then you move to tier 2. And remember, if they've been identified through the universal screener and see where they are, if these are students, so students at tier 2 are students who've been identified through universal screening, like I just said, and using diagnostic assessments who need more intensive instructional support. So instruction here would look like they will all still continue to get tier 1 support, but they will also get targeted supplemental evidence-based instruction that's delivered in small groups. And this instruction will be delivered with fidelity and consistency. And then if those students even getting tier 2 support, you're seeing through progress monitoring that they're not responding, then they would be also tier 3. And they would get even more intensive supplemental instruction, which was in small groups or even sometimes as on an individual basis. And this instruction will also be delivered with fidelity and consistency. So let's take some time to reflect on this. Okay, so how do you ensure in your classroom that all students are receiving high quality instruction? So like, what are you doing in your classroom, or what happens at your school? And think about what I just showed you. Like, are you doing small group instruction? If you're doing small group instruction, what does it look like? So if we can see a raised hand, so we can get some, so that we can share with each other what you're doing in your classroom, in your small group, when you may notice that kids need more assistance. Do we have any hands raised? I see April Washington raised her hand. We'd love to hear from you, April. I saw that hand raised. While we're waiting for April to come off of mute, let's see what some people are saying in the chat. So I see small group, let's see, small groups while children are still facilitating themselves with Children's Choice Learning Centers. I would love to hear what Children's Choice Learning Centers are. Alicia, were we able to get our friend off of mute that wanted to share?
April, you do have the ability to come off mute now if you wanted to share.
Hello, April. Uh-oh, she's clicking it and it's not working. Well,
Let me try.
Okay. Well, while you're waiting, let's see what else is happening in the chat. Okay, so planning based on the needs and abilities of each student, that's very important. I primarily do assessments and have not been in the home since COVID hit. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Children's Choice, oh, this was I was asking about Children's Choice Learning Centers. Okay, it's having technology, writing, math. Okay, are you, Alicia, what grade do you teach? Guided reading small group for phonics. Phonics instruction is very important, and the assessments will tell us what we need to do to really pinpoint where our students need to be. Like when we talked about assessment earlier, that's like diagnostic assessment will really help us there.
Hi, this is Alicia.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi, I don't actually teach, but I do teach teachers, and I work with a preschool setting.
Mm-hmm.
So in the classrooms, there are 2 teachers, one that is teaching small groups,
Mm-hmm.
while the other teacher is facilitating, prompting the children, asking open-ended questions.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move to core tenet number 3. All right, progress monitoring. So progress monitoring is a system for monitoring student progress and the effectiveness of the supports provided to students. So basically, this is where everything we just talked about, like, okay, so we may have identified a student that needs extra support and we identified them at tier 2, but we just don't want to just start doing and just keep doing instruction and just not seeing how they're progressing. So we need to progress monitor while they're in small groups to see if what we're doing is working. So let's watch a quick video about progress monitoring.
The third core tenet of RTI is progress monitoring. Let's have a quick recap of the RTI assessment process. Think back to when we first talked about universal screening. It's like a thermometer that measures if instruction is working for students. For all students who did not meet the benchmark on universal screeners, diagnostic assessments are administered in specific skill areas such as phonological awareness or phonics, and then each student is progress monitored. So, what exactly is progress monitoring? Progress monitoring is a system for closely tracking student progress and the effectiveness of the supports provided to the students. It must be done on a schedule and recorded to analyze and understand if instructional practices and interventions are working. The assessments used to progress monitor are brief, valid, and reliable. Students are assessed at regular intervals, which could be weekly, biweekly, or monthly, depending on the needs of the student. A good rule of thumb is to assess students that are at or above benchmark in Tier 1 once every 6 weeks, assess students that are below benchmark in Tier 2 once every 2 weeks, and assess students that are well below benchmark in Tier 3 at least once every 5 days.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and reflect on our third core tenet, which is progress monitoring. So I want you to think, how is student progress measured in your classroom or in your school, depending on if you're a classroom teacher or not, and how often is it measured? I know this was always kind of like one of those things that was a question, kind of like when I was coaching, like, well, how often do I need to progress monitor students? And hopefully the table that you just saw helped you to see kind of some suggested frequencies that you could use. So again, if you could leave something in the chat, or you can come off of mute and raise your hand to think, like, how often do you progress monitor students in your classroom, and maybe even talk about how you progress monitor them. We would love to hear from you. And if you're not progress monitoring at this time, then don't feel bad. You know, there's always time to improve practice. So yes, it is ongoing. It absolutely is, Alicia. But these are one of the things that is very important so that we can kind of see and track how our students are doing in the classroom. Yes, Alex, Cox Campus will soon be launching a course that's dedicated just to progress monitoring. So we are excited to see that come to fruition. Okay, you have reading intervention lists who provide the interventions and use DIBELS. Yes, I remember I used to use DIBELS to help teachers to progress monitor. All right, great. I see some ways that, let's see what else. I'm not familiar with Success Tracker, but I see some ways that people using progress monitoring in their classrooms to use tools to assess and monitor kids' portfolios. All right, great. And it's also, progress monitoring is also a great way to share information with parents so that they can also see and be part of the process for how their students are doing and really see how their kids are growing. So it's a good way to even even communicate with the reading intervention lists that are in your school. So it's a great way to communicate with other team members and parents, and sometimes even the kids themselves so that they can see how they're doing. All right, so let's move on to the next core tenet, which is database decision making. And this is basically the process of using data to make informed decisions that occur at all levels of RTI implementation. So let's go ahead and see a quick video on database decision making.
The fourth core tenet of RTI is data-based decision making. Up until this point, we've talked a lot about data collection, but now let's focus on all the ways we can use the data to inform instruction with our students. First, it's important to understand that data-based decision-making is the process of using data to make informed decisions, and this occurs at all levels of RTI implementation and all levels of the prevention system. For example, data can show us how all third grade classes did on the mid-year oral reading fluency assessment. It can also tell us if one class had more gains in comparison to all other homerooms. Knowing this information, we could ask that specific teacher to share their teaching practices with their teammates. We can use data to estimate rates of improvement, identify students who are not demonstrating adequate progress, and compare the efficacy of different forms of instruction, and so much more. Download our data-based decision-making resource below the video and get a list of the types of decisions that can be made using the data collected in the RTI process. One thing to be mindful of when collecting the data is to always remember the purpose. It can be very overwhelming looking at a sea of data, especially when you're not sure what you're looking for. To prevent confusion and be more effective, it's important to establish clear routines and procedures for analyzing and making decisions. You can start by setting explicit decision-making rules for assessing student progress. creating structures for selecting research-based interventions, and providing trainings for teachers who need support with data analysis. We have one more core tenet to discuss.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next slide, and let's talk about so there's so many ways you could use data, right? There's so many ways, and like in the video, you can see like a checklist that you can kind of see that you can print out from the course and see and remind yourself of all the ways we can use data. So some ways that I know that we used to use it in my school was to evaluate the effectiveness of an instructional strategy, to identify students who are not demonstrating adequate progress, to create intervention groups based off of skill deficits, and to compare and contrast adequacy of core curriculum materials. So there's lots of different ways that you can use data in your classroom or school-wide, how a school can use data. So let's go ahead to reflect. And I would like to ask you, if you're using a process right now, what processes do you use in your classroom or in your school to determine which interventions to provide to students? So like, for example, do you just choose an intervention? Do you research it yourself, or is there an actual like document, or do you have meetings? Okay, we see a raised hand. So can we answer this raised hand? I would love to hear from you. I think I hear somebody.
Can you hear me?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, so we do, one of our biggest thing is trauma enforced. We do have BRI. We did a lot of trainings on our program about that. And we do have an open communication with our parents. So that's our number one, I think, best practice that we use with our parents and our children, because parents need to know where we are, and we need to collaborate with them to work together to reach the goal.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. That's so important that you're lifting that up, because the parents do need to be involved and know what's going on. And how do you say so exactly how do you involve the parents in the process?
First, we let them know of what's happening, and we sit down with them and we create a plan. We do have part, they need to work at home on something, and we have to work on some goals at school too. And we meet maybe once a month, once every 2 months, depends on the severity of the problem or the level of the intervention that we have to provide support. So working with our mental health and behavior support, we will set up the goals. Then parents have to work at home with the same goal we will work at school, or
Love it.
something close to, depends on what it is.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that.
You are welcome.
All right. So we're going to move to the next core tenet, which is infrastructure and systems. And this is a set of organizational structures and systems in a school that are needed for something to operate successfully. So we're going to watch a video, and this response to intervention course was created for instructional leaders like principals and for assistant principals. And so when we're talking through it through the lens, we're going to talk about it through the lens of classrooms, but think about at this high level, this is really for where the leaders in your building are working with teachers and working with paraprofessionals and everyone in the building to get these structures in place. So let's watch the video.
In order to accomplish the goal of all students becoming proficient readers, a strong infrastructure and clear support systems need to be in place. Infrastructure is the set of organizational structures and systems needed for something to operate successfully. High-quality school infrastructure helps facilitate better instruction and improve student outcomes due to effective and efficient systems. We can identify 4 major elements of RTI infrastructure: leadership, effective teaming, professional development, and family and community engagement. Let's take
All right, so when we're talking about systems, let's be more specific and think, okay, what kind of systems would we need in a school to run and for RTI or responsive intervention to run well? So one thing I can think of is creating and implementing a school-wide assessment plan. Another thing may be establishing standard protocols to support students who are identified as tier 2 and tier 3, making a checklist of evaluating a new curriculum before purchasing it to ensure that it's aligned to the current research. And another system may be building a reading block schedule that is at a minimum 90 minutes long. So all the examples I just gave you are examples of systems and infrastructure that need to be in place so that response to intervention can run well, because when you have clear processes in place, it helps to make things be more manageable. So let's look at the first one, the first element of infrastructure and systems, which is leadership. And we just kind of talked about that. And people that may be on the leadership team may be like your principal, your assistant principal. There may be teachers on the leadership team that help make the things that I just talked about, put those things in place. The next element would be effective teaming. So infrastructure and support systems are necessary for effective teaming. So as a result, teams participate in the school improvement processes and help facilitate the implementation of RTI. So examples of implementation teams include grade level teams, an assessment team, the leadership team, and we can just keep on going on and on for examples of effective teams. But all these teams have the same goal in mind, which is for children to learn how to read. So if you can look at the next slide, which is professional development. So a supportive environment for professional learning helps to ensure a highly knowledgeable staff and make sure that core quality instruction is happening and that there's implementation of evidence-based practices. So this could look like, professional development could look like many different things, right? It could be a book study, it could be professional learning communities, it could be monthly differentiated trainings, job embedded coaching for select teachers, or attending in-state or out-of-state conferences. So let's go ahead and watch this next video and a teacher is going to tell us about her experience with professional development.
Next, let's listen to how Kelly feels about professional development.
I love professional development. I watch as many webinars or attend conferences any chance I can get, because I think just the more that you learn, the better we're able to serve the students. And when you've been teaching for a really long time, it can get stagnant and you do the same things over and over again. Whereas going to professional development, whether it is a webinar or an in-person conference, it like just recharges you and energizes you to like, oh wow, I can try this with my reading group, or I can do this with my math group. And it's just, I love it.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide, and I just want you to think right now, like, can you relate to what was shared in this video with what she said about how she likes professional development, and why could you relate to it if you could? And even if you could tell me, like, what's your favorite way to receive professional development? So I say, I totally agree with her. I've never heard so much about the science of reading. Thanks, Evelyn. Does anyone else want to share? I know I love professional development. I love reading about new ways, instructional methods, going to a webinar. But my favorite way was actually watching people actually teach, because you like watching master teachers. I love to learn every way: webinars, books, live PD. It's all fantastic. Okay, we have someone raising their hand. Evelyn, let's get Evelyn.
Okay, yes.
Hi, Evelyn.
Yes, hi. I've seen you featured on Cox, and I've actually finished that whole program, and I just absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Now, with that whole question, I've attended so many webinars, so heard so many YouTubes, but I have to say the Cox program really did it for me because of the asynchronous nature of it. So a plug for Cox Campus for sure.
Yay, thank you.
Now it's interesting because I attended a workshop yesterday with the Reading League. And what was interesting about it was, you know, you talk about leadership and the infrastructure. And what I have found was that after looking at this is that not all educational boards are on board with this because they, you know, so there are probably has to even go higher than that for states to be adopted, because someone was saying that the New York State hasn't adopted it yet. Other places like Arkansas has, but that really affects, you know, from leadership going downward. And one frustrated dyslexia parent with a dyslexic child said, well, how can I do the whole science of reading if in the classroom they are implementing leveled reading? So, you know, if we talk about this whole idea of science of reading, and it sort of cancels things out because you don't necessarily have that orthographic mapping. So so there was that dilemma. So when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking there's this whole dilemma, especially for parents that have children that need that extra attention and it's not getting that intervention. I could see them being frustrated. So I would probably even suggest maybe Cox Campus having something like that for parents so that other people can refer them, especially if they're in a state where they don't agree necessarily with the kind of educational philosophy that's happening around reading. So
I love that suggestion. Well, I love that. Thank you. I love that suggestion. And I'm glad that you said it here. And it starts from the top in education. You're absolutely right. And that's why we even decided, because at first, okay, this might be too much information, but I'm just telling you. At first, this course was going to be created for teachers, but we changed our mind and made it more so for district leaders and for principals, because we know that it starts from the top. And you're absolutely right. You know, sometimes, you know, it's even sometimes hard for teachers to sometimes, if they're learning these things, to like, if there's already a curriculum in place or there's something, you know, else that's already there. But we hope that when teachers watch this, and even principals, that they can advocate also within their districts for the science of reading and for, you know, just response to intervention, just these things. So but I agree, it would be great to have something for parents as well to watch. So thank you for that suggestion. Okay, anyone else? So let me see the time. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. With family and community engagement. This is exactly what we were talking about. So we want to communicate effectively with families and community by actively engaging them in the response to intervention process. And families need to be involved in decisions regarding adjustments to interventions with their children and related changes to their students' core curriculum. So this will help improve trust and build knowledge so that students can have better outcomes. And engaging families in their child's educational journey, of course, is always great. Like, it helps with buy-in, and it results in so much more getting accomplished. So let's go ahead and reflect. This is our last reflection. And think, does your school use a systematic approach to provide extra help for students? I think we just had someone earlier talk about what they do at their school and what is it, and is there any written documentation about this approach? So I'm going to kind of skip this one because we kind of already talked about that and had someone share what they do at their school just for the sake of time. So let's go ahead, because I really want to share this next thing with you, because I think this is like kind of makes things really applicable. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so you know that things don't always run as smoothly as we want. And I don't have to tell you that teaching is challenging, and there are going to be barriers that, if not overcome, these barriers are going to prevent us from achieving our goals. And we just kind of was talking about this, right? So, however, sometimes we have to look at these obstacles as opportunities to create systems that are tailored specifically for our needs, whether that's the school's needs or the classroom's needs. So how can we look at these obstacles in the eye and overcome them? So one way is to have a good problem-solving process that will help us address challenges that arise. So we're going to watch a video that outlines 5-step problem-solving framework. So let's watch this video, and it'll help us walk us through a problem-solving framework.
A good problem-solving model encourages collaboration, eliminates confusion, and ensures data-based decision-making. We've created a 5-step problem-solving framework that you can use when problem-solving possible barriers for RTI implementation. And in the next step, we'll provide an example scenario. But first, let's go over 5 steps for a systematic approach to problem-solving. The first step is to identify the problem. With a team, identify a problem that, if solved, would have a large impact of achieving your goal. For example, think about some of your largest barriers for implementing RTI with fidelity. The next step is collecting and analyzing data. In this step, data is collected that relates to the problem. Then, this data is analyzed to look for trends. This step is critical to making informed decisions because it helps to eliminate bias and preconceptions. Later on, the data you gathered will be used as baseline data to track and see if the solution you implement is working. Be careful not to jump into coming up with solutions just yet. Instead, focus on brainstorming potential root causes. Step 3 is brainstorming and choosing a solution. Now it's time to brainstorm possible solutions. As a team, eliminate solutions that may be less effective or not realistic and choose a solution to implement. Step 4 is implementing and monitoring the solution. This will probably be the most time-consuming step because team members create a clear plan of action for implementation and monitoring. Afterwards, this plan will be used to roll out the new changes. Once implementation is begun, data is collected to confirm if there is measurable improvement due to the new changes. Finally, step 5 is to reflect on the outcome. In this step, the team will review the data again and see if things have improved and if the goal was met. If the goal was met, record the process in detail so that it can be replicated by others for sustainability and continue to monitor the process as needed. If the solution didn't work, repeat the process, starting by reflecting on the new information you gathered. These steps are repeatable, and at any point in time, the collective group can decide to return to a previous step. You can download our problem-solving steps using the link below the video.
All right. So those problem-solving steps, if we can look at the next slide, I'm just going to repeat them. First, identify the problem, collect and analyze the data, brainstorm and choose a solution, implement and monitor the solution, and reflect on the outcome. And this can be used, again, you can use this at the district level, you can use this at your school leadership level, you can go down and use this at the classroom level with a group of grade level teachers. Like, you can use this even when you're working, a teacher is working with an intervention specialist, when you're working with a parent. So these are really good problem-solving steps that we have when you encounter some issues. And some examples of some scenarios that you may run across would be, let's look at the next slide. So some examples, some scenarios that you may come across at your school. These are some examples that I've run across when I was in the school. Was I have a new student that comes in my classroom and they're below reading level, grade reading level. Maybe there are some parents that are not engaging at school functions. What can you do? Like at a school level. The first one was at a classroom level. Maybe at the school, you notice that a lot of parents are not coming to school functions. Like, what can you do? Maybe you notice that attendance rates are low. What can you do? So just different things that you can use that same scenario, different scenarios you can use that problem-solving framework for. And always looking at the data to see, because sometimes you don't want to make assumptions, right? And using data really helps you stay focused and on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So let's go ahead and look back at our true and false. And so remember what I asked you before. So number one, RTI is the sole responsibility of the teacher. So looking at that, would you say, is that, now you can put it in the comments now, is that true or false? After everything that we've talked about. Yep, false. Yep. Okay. RTI, everyone is involved in the process of RTI. The whole school staff is, right? It's not just the principal, it's not just the teacher, it's not just the parent. Everybody is involved in the process. So let's look at number two. The main, thank you. The main purpose of RTI is prevention. Is that true or false? True. Yep, it's true, right? The main purpose of RTI is we want to prevent students from even getting to that point, right? And our last one, students should stay in the same tier throughout the entire school year. So if they're tier 2, they need to stay there throughout the false. And we use data and progress monitoring because we want to find out, I see all those false and false, yes, false and false. We are using data because we want them to move, right? We want to see that growth and progress. Great. All right, so let's revisit our goals. Let's look at our goals one last time for the session. And the goal was to learn the 5 core tenets of RTI, reflect on personal teaching practices, learn a way to help problem solve, and discover how to find more useful content on Cox Campus. Right, oh wait, let me add, okay, so we did that, but I see a comment in the comments that I just want to address. Alicia, can you come up, can you come off and mute? Do you want to, I know it could be both.
Here.
I don't know if you want to come. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Okay, what do you mean by could be both? Could it be both?
Because the reason that I say that is because I train on Pyramid Plus, and at times children can move up based on how rigorous that the teacher, the parents, or the community is helping that child. Or you could do everything that you could, that child still stay in the same tier. So that's why I was thinking that it could be both.
Okay, well, I got you. I understand how you're saying it. The way I was saying it more so was kind of like the thought sometimes that people think that children should only, like that's the only solution. Like once they assess them at the beginning of the year, sometimes people just keep the child there because they've identified them at the beginning of the year and they think that's where they're supposed to stay for the entire year. And they're not progress monitoring or looking at what's happening throughout the year. I understand what you're saying, but that's the way I was putting it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, no, it makes sense. I think our thoughts were the same because you do have educators that think if that child is being identified in the earliest of the year, they should stay here to see more progress when it could be that child move up and still learning or mastering what they previously learned and still learning a new skill.
Yeah, but I understand your point too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's look at, we're gonna do a quick activity and we're gonna share. So I hope this goes, let's try to work this out, Sam. So what you're gonna do is, in the chat, you're gonna see a link and you're gonna go and you're gonna share one word to describe how you are feeling about the information that we shared today. And I'm letting you know, it's a Google slide. And then you see where there's like the little red square, you're going to have to click on the text box and then enter your word. So you're going to see like a lot of people entering words in this Google slide. And then we're going to share it so that you can all see what the words people have shared, if that makes sense. So again, you're going to go to the text box and then fill in your word. Okay, guys. So I am looking at the time, and I always value when we say we're going to have a start and end time. So I just want to share with you guys, just share some of these out a little bit. And I see great process, hopeful, eye-opening. I saw some in the chat, inspired. All right, this is great. And we will definitely save this for feedback. So I just want to talk about some next steps really quick. I might be speed talking a little bit here. Okay, so for our next steps, and let's look at the next slide. We would love for you to come on Cox Campus and look at more about K-3 courses. So we have courses about classroom ecosystem, assessing our students, which we kind of talked about a little bit in the RTI process. Intervention, we have targeted small group instruction. We talked about intervention if you're interested in that for ideas. We have a phonics course. We have a course about early literacy. So we gave you the chat. Maybe we could drop it in the chat again one more time, the link to Cox Campus. And let's look at the next slide real quick. All right, so let's go ahead. Oh, did we have the poll? Was there a slide before that one?
No, that's at the end.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so our next course is going to be about reading fluency, and that's on April 28th, and that's going to be at the same time from 3 to 4. We would love to see you there. And let's look at our last slide. That's the one I was talking about, was the poll. So how did we do? We're going to drop a link in the chat. And if you could please go ahead and fill out how we did. How did you like this training? So we can learn from ourselves, because we should be learning about how, you know, just like the children are learning, we always got to learn and give feedback for ourselves too. So if you can fill that out in the chat, the poll, and when you finish, that's it. We love having you here. This was, I hope that you enjoyed this training. And see you next time. Appreciate you guys coming.